DFS tips for UFC Vegas 103. We'll talk lineup construction, strategy, and more. As always, you can call me Kunith. Let's make some money this week. We'll start with value plays at 8,000 and below. Pieces you're going to need in your lineup to make everything work salary-wise. Before we do, if you haven't already, go back and watch the predictions video from earlier in the week. That is a full card breakdown, different than this video. So watch that, then watch this, and you'll be all set. I'm going to approach the value plays a little bit different than before. So these are plays at 8,000 and below. Normally we pick out the ones that we want, but I'm going to go in reverse order and tell you what kind of player pool we're looking at this week. So if you watch a predictions video, you know Ramos, Lane, Patterson, I think they're all going to lose, and I think they all lose inside the distance. So I'm not really interested in playing any of them. If you were running, say, 150 lineups, somebody you want a little bit of exposure to is Sam Patterson. Lesser grapplers have taken Danny Barlow down. That was pre-UFC, so he's probably gotten a bit better from there, and I do think that Danny Barlow is one of the better plays on the slate, but you want to have a little bit of exposure to Sam Patterson. I'm not mad at you, because if he wins, he probably scores a whole lot of points, and he probably does it in the first round. But for the player pool that we're looking at this week, not too interested, but I had to throw that out there. Nasrat Haqparast, though. Got to touch on Haqparast because we talked about it in the predictions video. I think he's going to win. I think he's got experience on his side. I think he's got preparation on his side. I like that he's in that southpaw stance. I think that left hand could give Ribovics real issues in there, and I think a lot of people are just kind of looking at the Ribovics betting line and thinking he has to win. I wrote a little bit about this on kunithmma.com earlier in the week. When we look at these fight cards, there is almost always a big favorite that's going to flop week after week, especially in this like minus 200, 250, 300 range. Last week it was Nasrat. The week before that it was Rodolfo Vieira. The week before that it was Cody Steele. The week before that it was Shara Bullet. So you see time and time again, even the week before that, Payne Talbot and Rinya Nakamura both flopped, and they were minus 1,200 and minus like 900 respectively. So I don't want to be fooled by the betting line, but there's a reason why I'm bringing Nasrat Haqparast up. It's not because I think he's one of the best value plays of the week. It's not because I think he should belong in the player pool. I actually don't, but I do think that you should probably bet him if you're not playing him on Draftkings. Because you look at the numbers that he's put up, you know that it's going to be pretty much a striking only attack that he's throwing out there. And like against Landon Quiones, where he threw a ton, almost all of them were considered significant strikes. Didn't break 100 points at 95. At 87, he got 117, but that was with 2 knockdowns in the first round against Jamie Malarkey. He's not going to do that to Ribovics. He's going to have to beat him on the scorecards. You're probably going to see something like this in that Jared Gordon fight where he scored 90 points. I don't think he has that 100 plus ceiling that we need this week. So although I think he's going to win, he's not somebody that I have in value play consideration, but we've talked about this before. I think the last time we discussed it was when Christian Rodriguez was fighting Austen. When the betting line is this wide and you don't want to have Nasrat Haqparast in your lineups, let's say you're running single entry, for example, and you decide not to pull the trigger on Haqparast, you might as well almost hedge a little bit by placing a money line bet on Nasrat Haqparast, because right now he's at like plus 210. Now remember this principle, I learned it while watching another channel talk about DFS for NFL, and it was with Zay Flowers, if you guys remember the example from a couple of weeks ago. Zay Flowers at the time wasn't scoring a whole lot of touchdowns. It was a showdown game that the Ravens were in, and the person who was talking about it said, I am not going to put Zay Flowers in my lineup because he doesn't score a lot of touchdowns, and if he doesn't score a touchdown in this game, I probably end up losing. But since I'm not going to put him in my lineups, I will place a bet on Zay Flowers to score a touchdown. I think it was at like plus 185 or something. So that's how I feel about Nasrat Haqparast. If you're going to play him on DraftKings, fine, be my guest. But if you're not going to, you might as well place a bet on him. I, myself, will probably be staying away as far as DFS goes. Douglas Silva de Andrade, I'm not really interested. Hyder Amil is an interesting play just because he can go out there, secure that knockout, crazy output, really chases that finish and hits like a truck, but I don't think he reaches William Gomis this week. I think Gomis a little bit too smooth. I think he's a little bit too fluid, moves his head too well. He's probably going to get takedowns. So Hyder Amil, somebody who I kind of put in like that Sam Patterson bucket where if you want it because of the upside, cool, but personally I'm not getting there. Andrea Lee, obviously no. Lucas Almeida, though, it's probably going to be my first value play that we're really going to seriously consider.
I'll have to contemplate. have to consider
putting in the lineups this week. And I'm not really too concerned about the fight log and the box score we saw against Pat Sabatini. Didn't really have much for him on the mat. But he's also meant to be losing these fights, right? He's 7,100, 7,100, 77, 74. But what I like about him is that he's got a ton of power, and he's fighting a guy who only knows to move forward, right? Lucas Almeida's not going to be the one pressing forward. Danny Silva will be, and I think he's going to walk on to something heavy. Danny Silva, not really known for having his big punching power like we talked about in the predictions video from earlier in the week, so I think Lucas Almeida is going to make a fight of this. Even if it gets extended, I could see him picking up more than one knockdown in this fight. He really digs in, sits down on everything, and I think he can find a shot that ends up hurting and knocking out Danny Silva, and I think he's going to come in at pretty low ownership. So Lucas Almeida, somebody who's definitely in value play consideration for me this week. Moving up, I would say Cody Brundage has to be in value play consideration. You're probably going to need the winner of this fight in your lineups because it probably doesn't go beyond the first round, or at least a round and a half. Like, you want to take under a round and a half, this is the fight to do it. This is mostly a pick against Julian Marquez more than it is a pick for Cody Brundage, because Julian Marquez has just looked awful in his last 3 fights. He had nothing for RoboCop, got tired in under 5 minutes against who was it? Marc-Andre Barrio, knocked out early by Zach Reese. Just not impressive anymore. Somebody who I think is definitely over the hill. And he was making waves in the UFC because he was submitting guys, he was fighting through adversity. But the only reason we know that he's fighting through adversity is because of the adversity. He's getting touched up by everybody. And now that he doesn't have the durability to just walk through these strikes, I think he's toast. And I think Cody Brundage, he fights out of a good gym at the very least. So I'm hoping that he's coming into this one dialed in, focused, and looking to land a big shot early to put Marquez on ice. Charles Johnson, somebody I think is going to win this fight. I know he's one of the most popular underdogs of the week. I can look at this fight log because it's rich enough. He's had enough fights in the UFC. He doesn't really break 100 points all that often. You had that one against Jimmy Flick. He's not fighting Jimmy Flick this week, let me tell you. I like Charles Johnson. I think that he's going to win, but if I were to attack one side of this matchup from a DraftKings perspective, it would be his opponent in Temerov. I'm not looking to play Charles Johnson this week, and I think he comes in way overowned. I realize I completely skipped over Asu Almabayev, my boy. Love me some Asu Almabayev, especially this week. I think he's a bad matchup for Manel Kape. I think he's going to put a pace on him. I think he's going to force him to wrestle. I think once he gets him to the ground, it's going to be hard for Kape to get back up to his feet as well. One thing about Asu Almabayev is that he does a really good job of keeping guys away from the fence. And you see so many of these dudes when it comes to MMA grappling, they get their takedowns and then they just allow their opponents to work back up to their feet along the fence. But Asu Almabayev does a good job of turning his opponents away from the fence, securing takedowns in the middle of the cage, or if he does it up against the cage, again, kind of creating distance between his opponent and the cage so that they can't use it to get up. And it also gives him more control because he can go on either side of their body. And he strikes me as a guy who can fight at a grappling heavy pace for 25 minutes. And I don't think he's going to be playing the punch and kick game with Manel Kape for all that long, because he's at a speed disadvantage, at a power disadvantage, and I think it's going to become very clear to him and the people that are watching that that's the case early on in this fight. So I don't think he wastes a whole lot of time. I think he just takes the path of least resistance here, gets takedowns, and just does what he does best. And for people saying that, oh, he's going to get knocked out or whatever, it would be the first time in 23 fights that he's been knocked out. So I like my chances with Asu Almabayev's chin, with his wrestling, with his pace, and he's broken slates before. And with 5 rounds to work, that really favors his kind of style. We're going to use these pieces to start building out some lineups before we do. If you haven't already, like the video, subscribe to the channel, comment something for the algorithm. You know how the algorithm works. We'll start with building your cash game lineups this week. I do think that we have a stackable main event on our hands. I think it goes over 2.5 rounds. So give me Manel Kape, and we're going to go with the other side of this matchup in Asu Almabayev. Now we have to get a cheap piece that we think isn't going to get finished, and that's where you play Nasrat Haqparast. That's where he makes sense, is in your cash game lineups. Not your tournaments, because he lacks the upside, but I do like him in this case, because even if he goes the full 3, doesn't get the win, scores you 35, 40 DraftKings points with his output alone, I'm happy with that. With 8,900 left over, we can come up here and start getting some of the more expensive pieces in our lineup. Get somebody like a JJ Aldrich, get somebody like a William Gomis. Now you've got 9,200 left over. You can come up here to somebody like John Castaneda. Now, you don't have any of the premier guys. You don't have the Chepes or the Pintos or the Barlows. But we're not looking at scoring ceiling and finishing upside when it comes to your cash game lineups. We're just looking for winners. Best case scenario, you're going to get 5 winners in your lineup when you stack the main event. And I think you could do that here. But really, we're just looking for 4. Great matchup for Aldrich. I think Gomis is a step ahead just in terms of MMA skill and fight IQ than Hyder Amil. John Castaneda, younger guy who's going to throw a lot more volume than Silva, stay in his chest, let his hands go, and then you're guaranteed a winner at the top here. You just hope that Nasrat Haqparast doesn't get like flash knocked out in the first round or first couple of minutes of the fight, but that doesn't really happen for him all that often. Dude has a good chin, and I think he's going to push Ribovics to the edge. So this would be the cash game recipe. It's probably not going to be much different than what you see on KunithMMA.com. Last week, cash game recipe smacked on KunithMMA.com. The 3 plays for the DFS strategy guide as far as your cash game plays go, my 3 favorite cash game pieces last week were Ricky Simone, Melk Costa, and Nursultan Ruzaboyev. Bang, bang, bang. You can get my weekly DFS strategy guide, lineup optimizer, data model, projections, all of that on KunithMMA.com, as well as the official betting article that did really well last week and the community parlay. All of that could be found on the website, linked in the comments and in the description. And it's especially helpful when we have weeks where we're on a time crunch like last week where I wasn't able to get the final picks video out, but you still got all the DFS goodness. Now we're getting it out this week, but still, you can get a leg up on the competition possibly by visiting KunithMMA.com, getting yourself a membership. Best way to support the channel. Back to the breakdown. Now, as far as your tournament lineups go, I don't think you can do any wrong at the top of the range, right? Chepe is fine. Pinto is fine. Barlow is fine. I'm cool with all of these. You've got high finishing upside for all of them, and I don't really like one more than the other, really, because I think that Chepe is going to be able to get it done just with his pace, land a lot of strikes, get control time, takedowns, finish this one late, and score a lot of points. Look at this fight against Damon Jackson. He ends up scoring 139 points in a decision win over 3 rounds. Just absurd. Mario Pinto, he's somebody who we expect to go in there, pick up a knockout in his UFC debut. I guess he'd be the one that I like the least just because of the unknowns. And then Danny Barlow, more than capable of going out there and landing that knockout shot, say early in the first round, and scoring north of 100 points. Hasn't done it yet, but I think he could do it this week. But let's say if you could only play one of them, let's just go with Chepe just so we have a look. At this point with 81.20 left over, I'm going to come down here, grab some of my value plays. I'll grab Montana De La Rosa. I'm going to grab Asu Almabayev. 8,500, we can look toward this mid-range. I'd probably play Temerov, which, again, I think that Johnson wins, but DFS is not about playing the guys who you think are going to win. It's about playing those who have high finishing upside or those who are low owned. If you can get a mix of the two, you're in business. 85.50 left over. I'll probably grab Lucas Almeida, and then I can come up here and grab one of these more expensive pieces again. I'm cool with that. Let me blow it up and give you a different look. Let's say you wanted to go with somebody like, let's say we started with Cody Brundage. Let's say you wanted to play Manel Kape. I'll give you a look. I know some of you are going to come here to play Ribovics. I'll give you a look. We have to come down here and grab some less expensive pieces now, so that's where I probably come to a Montana De La Rosa again. Maybe a Lucas Almeida again, and with 8,700 left over per fighter, we can get JJ Aldrich, who I'm not really interested in. JJ Aldrich just doesn't really do much in there. We have the other side of this matchup. We have the other side of this matchup. We have the other side of this matchup. So really, I'm stuck here playing somebody like Temerov, or if you really wanted to get crazy and come down here to somebody like a Hyder or Amil, you could do that. Asu Almabayev, Montana De La Rosa, Cody Brundage, John Castaneda, William Gomis, Danny Barlow. I think Castaneda and William Gomis are going to be way under-owned for what they could possibly go out there and do. I think the output coming from John Castaneda is going to serve him pretty well. I think he's going to get takedowns at will in this fight. D Silva, Brazilian guy, takedowns, jiu-jitsu, it's not his game. You would think that it is, coming from where he comes from, but it's really not. He wants to stand and bang, and at 40 years old, I don't think that he's going to be able to keep up with the pace that Castaneda is going to set for him, especially with John Castaneda fighting for his job this week. William Gomis, probably going to come out here and get a lot of takedowns. I think he needs to slow Hyder Amil down. I don't think he's going to want to stand and trade with this guy. Hyder Amil's got a big old head. He's very hittable. We saw Fernie Garcia take him to the brink in that 2-round fight. One of the best 2-round fights you'll ever see. And then Danny Barlow, he's got that length, got that size, got that athleticism, hard left hand, and we've seen Sam Patterson starched cold by 155er. So I'm not really too sold on Sam Patterson. I think Danny Barlow could end up scoring you that 100 points in that first round. If you wanted to do something crazy, you could come here and say, let me get Temerov, let me get Marquez, let me get Pinto, let me come down here, grab Asu Almabayev. I'll take Lucas Almeida as well, and then I'll take Castaneda here at 8,900. You left 100 salary on the table. I'm not mad at you. I think this is a week where you aren't going to be able to get away with leaving too much salary on the table. Unless, of course, let me see if all of our value plays hit. What would that end up putting us at? Well, you're going to definitely leave salary on the table if you do it that way. If you like that first round upside from Temerov and then you came here and you grabbed somebody like Barlow, for example, I mean, you do leave 2,000 salary on the table. That's not terrible. But if you came off a Temerov and he just got kind of outpointed by Charles Johnson, I mean, you're still leaving us 1,000 salary on the table at Chepe. That's barring if all of the value plays do what we need them to do. But we'll stop there. I don't want the video to be too long, especially because fights start at 4 p.m. Eastern time. But I hope this gives you a good starting point when you're building your lineups. Have fun with it, make some changes, get crazy with it, because the reality is the weirder the lineup, the better a chance it has of either being first or last. And that's kind of how you want to be building your tournament lineups. But if you've made it to this point in the video, thank you so much for watching. I really do appreciate it. Make sure you like the video, subscribe to the channel, comment something for the algorithm, and I will see you next week. Best of luck.